Imagine waking up at exactly 6:12 in the morning on a dry ledge of rock. Your canvas bedroll still holds the warmth of your body. Your boots are sitting beside your head, right where you left them. Nothing seems disturbed. Then you look at the grass. Fresh hyena tracks curve through the flattened stems and circle toward the place where you were sleeping. Close enough for the animal to study you. Close enough to catch your scent. Close enough to kill you before you even understood what was happening. You heard nothing. You saw nothing. You knew nothing. So why are you still alive? You had no claws ready, no armor, no speed. For hours, you were completely motionless in a world built to notice motion, blind in a world that survives by spotting weakness. Easy prey. At least, that is what you would assume. But wait, the tracks tell a different story. The hyena came closer. Then it turned away. Not because it failed to find you. It found you perfectly well. It simply never began the attack. A sleeping human looks defenseless. To a predator, that does not always mean defenseless. The predator came close. The attack never began. So maybe we have been asking the wrong question. The question is not simply, why didn't the predator bite the sleeping human? The deeper question is this: what stopped that encounter from ever turning into a hunt? Because a predator never reads a body by itself. It reads everything around that body, the ground underneath it, the route leading toward it, the smells hanging in the air, and whatever might happen after the first bite lands. Fresh ash near a shelter. Grass crushed by repeated footsteps. New human scent layered over older human scent. A path that looks easy on the way in, but suddenly feels dangerous when the animal imagines trying to escape. The survival test, then, did not begin when your eyes closed. It began earlier, when someone chose that ledge. It continued as people arranged bedding, boots, food, fire, and bodies around the site. Only after all of that did sleep finally arrive. Not stronger muscles, better preparation. Sleep is only the final scene of a survival strategy that started hours before the sleeper ever lay down. Now go back roughly 200,000 years to Border Cave in southern Africa. Imagine a human hand placing a bundle of broad-leafed grass onto cold stone. Then another bundle. Then another. The stems overlap and spread outward until the bare cave floor becomes something else. A surface where people can rest, gather, work, and sleep without pressing their bodies directly against rock. Archaeologists found traces of these grasses in parts of the cave, sometimes placed over layers of ash. Evidence also suggests that some of the old bedding was deliberately burned as people repeatedly cleaned and maintained the site. That might sound almost domestic, ordinary even. Wait, it is neither. The person lowering that grass is doing something evolutionarily unusual. They are changing the environment before the dangerous moment arrives. They are taking a random hollow in the landscape and turning it into a structured human space. The grass cannot fight. The ash cannot keep watch. The cave wall has no idea what a predator is. But when those things are arranged together, they begin to carry information: human scent, burned material, repeated activity, organized space. the memory of occupation. Other animals locate shelter. Humans start managing it. They decide where bodies will lie. They change the surface touching their skin. They leave behind signals showing that this is not an abandoned hole in the earth. It is a place people use, maintain, and intend to return to. Here, preparation lasted long enough to become archaeology. Not a weapon raised after midnight. A floor prepared before sunset. A small act of control, repeated until the cave itself began to hold the pattern of human life. Humans did not make the sleeping body stronger. They made the sleeping place harder to challenge. Now move north, across continents and through tens of thousands of years, until you reach Texoneres Cave in Catalonia. Near the cave entrance, Neanderthals broke stone, processed animal carcasses, and tended fires. Farther inside, in the protected galleries and darker recesses, cave hyenas, bears, wolves, and smaller carnivores also used the space. Their remains are mixed into the same ancient deposits. Stone flakes beside animal teeth. Burned bones beside bones marked by gnawing. Evidence of human work beside evidence of carnivore feeding. At first, it sounds like a constant battle for ownership, a cave repeatedly seized, lost, defended, and taken again. But the reality appears quieter than that. Archaeologists studying Texoneres found a recurring spatial pattern. Human activity tended to cluster near the outer part of the cave, where daylight, air movement, and fire made daily work possible. Carnivore traces appeared more often in the sheltered interior. Both humans and predators returned to the cave across thousands of years. But they were not necessarily there together. The occupations often alternated. The cave did not belong permanently to one side. It had something closer to a schedule. Now imagine approaching that entrance after dark as a hyena. You do not have to see a sleeping Neanderthal to realize the cave has changed. Smoke is trapped in the stone. Recently broken bone lies near a hearth. The air carries the overlapping scent of several humans, not one isolated body. And that narrow entrance creates a problem. It promises shelter on the way in, but it could become a trap on the way out. So would you enter simply because one human inside has stopped moving? Probably not. That sleeping body is only one signal among dozens. And it may not even be the most important one. An occupied place starts speaking before its occupants wake. That is the twist. Humans may have reduced the risk of attack without confronting the predator face to face. Fire zones, discarded remains, repeated walking routes, and concentrated human activity all announced that the cave had entered a human cycle. The boundary was not a wall built from stone blocks. It was a pattern built through repeated use, reinforced every time another group returned, lit a fire, prepared food, and slept there again. Human presence during waking hours created protection that continued after consciousness disappeared. Predators often avoid the occupied place before they ever meet the sleeping body. Now leave the Ice Age behind and enter Harar, Ethiopia, after sunset. Spotted hyenas move through narrow streets and around old stone walls. They pass homes, markets, livestock, dogs, and people. Their shoulders rise above their hindquarters, giving them that unmistakable sloping shape. Their jaws are powerful enough to crack bone. Yet in Harar, They travel through a city whose residents have lived beside them across generations. This is not simple taming, and it is not some universal instinct that makes every hyena behave the same way around people. Researchers comparing urban hyenas across Ethiopian cities found major local differences in their behavior. In Harar and Addis Ababa, hyenas allowed humans to approach more closely before fleeing than hyenas observed in Mekelle. The same species, different cities, different rules. How does that happen? Because a predator carries more than genetic instinct. It also carries the accumulated weight of experience. In Harar, the lesson has been repeated through countless ordinary encounters. A door opens, and a person steps into the street. Food appears in one location. In another location, shouting begins. Dogs chase. People move forward instead of backing away. The hyena notices the difference. It remembers which alleys tend to hold scraps. It learns which noises predict food and which ones predict pursuit. It experiments with distance, watches human posture, tracks routines, and adjusts its behavior one encounter at a time. Night after night, the city becomes a map. Not only a map of streets and walls, a map of permission. A sleeping person behind a door, then, is not simply an unattended mammal made of flesh. That person belongs to a larger system, to a house, to neighbors, to dogs, to lights, to doors, and to the chain of reactions the hyena has already seen. The animal is not just asking, "Could I bite this?" It is asking, "What would happen if I did?" That second question changes the entire encounter. Fear is not always ancient. Sometimes it is local. A predator does not fear humanity as an abstract idea. It learns the rules of the specific humans living around it. If you're still with me, hit subscribe, because the next predator hunts beside sleeping humans without hunting the humans themselves. High in Mongolia's Toast Mountains, darkness belongs to a cat built to almost vanish inside the landscape. A snow leopard crosses shattered ridges and steep gullies without drawing attention to itself. Its broad paws settle onto stone with barely a sound. Below those slopes, herders sleep beside corrals filled with goats. Warm bodies. Familiar prey. Sometimes only one barrier stands between hunger and food. So why would the leopard not simply attack the sleeping human first? Because being vulnerable is not the same thing as being recognized as prey. Between 2009 and 2020, researchers gathered GPS movement data from 23 snow leopards in Toast. They also collected activity information from collared cats, Siberian ibex, and domestic goats. The resulting pattern showed that snow leopards concentrated much of their movement during the night and around twilight, but they were not moving through an empty wilderness. They were navigating a complicated landscape where wild prey, livestock, people, cliffs, corrals, and open steppe each occupied a different place in the hunting map. A snow leopard does not simply launch itself at whatever happens to be still. It chooses terrain. It uses cover. It approaches along routes suited to the body, movement, and likely reaction of the animal it intends to catch. A goat trapped inside a corral presents one kind of hunting problem. An ibex standing on a steep slope presents another. A human lying near a shelter belongs to a different category one shaped by scent, posture, past encounters, and the possibility of retaliation. Not every opportunity is worth taking. Not every weakness is an invitation. And wait, this is where human fear often misreads the situation. When you picture a predator somewhere near your camp, you tend to imagine yourself at the center of its attention. You imagine the animal circling you, studying you, waiting for the moment your breathing slows. But the predator's world is already filled with more immediate calculations. Known prey, safer routes, familiar risks. The leopard may cross a ridge above your camp. It may catch your scent. It may stop and watch the goats inside the corral while you remain asleep only a short distance away. That does not mean it has confused you with them. Close does not mean confused. The cat can enter the human landscape without placing the human body inside its hunting sequence. Predators target opportunities, not vulnerability alone. But there is one place where that comforting pattern can fall apart. Imagine trying to sleep in Svalbard. Out there, a polar bear may approach a camp for a simple reason. It is checking whether anything nearby could be food. Not because it misunderstood some ancient agreement with humans. Not because it has forgotten the local rules. Because in an Arctic landscape where food can disappear for weeks, ignoring a possible source of energy can carry its own cost. That is why official safety guidance treats sleep as a dangerous opening. Campers are warned to avoid exposed coastal routes, set up alarm systems such as tripwires, and arrange for someone to remain on watch while everyone else sleeps. So why take those precautions if predators usually avoid spaces occupied by humans? Because usually is not a shield. Wait, put a human inside a predator's natural hunting environment, add hunger, isolation, and uncertainty. Suddenly, the familiar categories may no longer hold. The camp may not look like forbidden territory anymore. It may look like something worth investigating. Predators ignore sleeping humans, only while the old boundaries still make sense. And that means the easy answer is wrong. In most encounters, a predator does not walk up to your unconscious body, examine how helpless you are, and then decide that humans are simply too frightening to touch. The decision is often made much earlier, before it sees your face, before it reaches your bed, before the encounter has even entered the first stage of a hunt. The predator reads the smoke drifting near the shelter. It notices the narrow approach. It catches fresh trails, overlapping scents, blocked exits, nearby animals, and all the small signs showing that this one sleeping body is connected to a larger human presence. It is not necessarily afraid of the sleeper. It is interpreting the place around the sleeper. And that is where the deeper human achievement finally comes into view. We never evolved armor that slides over our skin when our eyes close. We did not grow claws for midnight, or develop some hidden defense that switches on once consciousness fades. What we evolved was a mind capable of protecting a future version of the body. A version that will soon become quiet, motionless, and unaware for 6 hours, 7 hours, perhaps 8. Stop and think about how strange that is. The awake version of you chooses the ground. The awake version of you organizes the shelter. It builds doors, maintains fires, gathers sleeping groups, sets alarms, places guards, and creates invisible boundaries that another species has to interpret before coming closer. One version prepares. The other inherits. The person who lies down receives protection from the person who was awake 10 minutes earlier. That is the survival strategy. Humans did not solve vulnerability by refusing to sleep. We did something more subtle. We altered the world around us until being unconscious became a risk we could afford to take. You survive sleep because your waking mind protects the body it is about to abandon. And tonight, without thinking much about it, you will perform the same ancient ritual. You will lock the door. You may check the window. You will pause if a floorboard shifts somewhere in the house, and listen long enough to decide whether the sound belongs there. In an unfamiliar hotel room, you notice where the exit is. You leave your phone within reach. Maybe you choose the side of the bed with a wall behind you, even though you could not explain exactly why that side feels better. Keys, water, light. Small objects placed around a body that expects to become unconscious. On the surface, all of this looks modern. Metal locks, electronic alarms, glowing screens, cameras, motion sensors. But the logic underneath them is ancient. It is the same logic behind the hand spreading grass across the stone floor of Border Cave. The same logic behind someone studying tracks around a shelter before night arrived. The same logic behind choosing a ledge with one obvious approach instead of a hollow surrounded by 3 hidden paths. So why does a strange room keep a small part of your mind awake? Why can you feel exhausted and still struggle to surrender consciousness? Is your brain malfunctioning? No. Not broken. Unconvinced. Before it gives up awareness, your nervous system is still asking the question it has carried across thousands of generations. Is this place stable enough for me to stop watching it? That tension is not proof that you are weak. It does not mean your brain has failed at sleeping. It means sleep was never passive. Safe sleep had to be selected. It had to be prepared. It had to be defended and repeated until the surroundings became predictable enough for the mind to release control. You fear the dark because darkness hides change. You arrange the room because an arranged space makes change easier to notice. You surrender awareness only after the waking version of you has placed a boundary around the version that will no longer be watching. Your fear of the dark is not the failure of sleep. It is the architect of safe sleep. Now return to that rock ledge at dawn. The canvas bedroll is still lying where it was. The boots still point toward the damp hyena tracks that curved through the flattened grass, came close to the sleeping body, and then disappeared back into the open country. But those tracks no longer tell the story of one fortunate human who happened to be spared. They tell something larger. They tell the story of a species that learned how to speak even while unconscious. Across stone floors, cave mouths, city alleys, mountain slopes, and camps at the edge of the wilderness, humans left messages that predators could understand. Occupied. Watched. Difficult. Not through claws waiting in the darkness. Through decisions made earlier, while there was still light. Imagine that achievement stretched across deep time. Among millions of species that must wake before they can actively defend themselves, humans developed the ability to prepare their defenses before consciousness disappeared. We chose the ground. We changed the shelter. We built the boundary. And wait, we never eliminated vulnerability. That was never the achievement. We created somewhere vulnerability could exist without automatically becoming death. That may be one of the quietest human superpowers. Not the ability to become impossible to harm, but the ability to build conditions where helplessness can be temporarily safe. Your sleeping body is evidence of ancient trust. Trust in walls. Trust in neighbors. Trust in doors, alarms, warning systems, and the waking mind that arranged the space before lying down. Human sleep became possible when safety became something we could build in advance. We taught the night where not to step. Subscribe.